A topic that has been coming up is how do we facilitate the transition and create the bridges from our current system to the next. While some people are like, F the system, we want to build a new one that doesn't interact with the old system. Practically speaking, we need to build a bridge to move the wealth and transmute the energy to creating this new paradigm. So I'm really excited to hear from all of you who work across different sectors and fields that speak to some of the infrastructure that's necessary to facilitate this transition. The name of this panel is Towards a Just and Regenerative Economy. And we're going to be exploring what it means to be rooted in place in the land, the waters, the communities that sustain us, and how we can look at law, finance, entrepreneurship, and cooperative practice and lived experiences on land, how we can all come together to design systems that honor the rights of nature, that uplift multiple forms of capital and make mutual aid and community wealth central rather than marginal. With that being said, my name is Susanna. I am the founder of the Bioregional Embassy, which will be launching next month, which is serving as a diplomatic agency to facilitate cooperation across multiple levels of government, from the municipal to the state to the federal / nation level, but also across various sectors, how we can apply local bioregional intelligence to shaping policy and allocating wealth and multiple forms of capital accordingly based on the needs and the context of place. I'll let the panelists introduce themselves. I'm excited to hear from you, Taryn. You can just give us like a minute or two intro, and then we'll come around and ask questions.
Awesome. Hello, everyone. I am Taryn. I am a regenerative landscape designer on Block Island. I am a regenerative flower farmer on Block Island, Rhode Island, and I also own a property stewardship company, and really love to also educate and advocate on how we can build regenerative businesses as entrepreneurs, as people pioneering a reciprocal relationship between the wealth that we steward and the land that we steward. And I'm really passionate about that and being here on this panel with all of these incredible minds and leaders in the same field.
Hi everyone, I'm Eliza Jacobs, and I work out of Brunswick, Maine at CEI, which is a community development financial institution, kind of like an alternative financial institution like a green bank or a credit union. And we really seek to support the transition to a more just and equitable economy, both by making financing more accessible to people who have been traditionally marginalized by the financial industry, but also making things like renewable energy and battery storage and electrification accessible to more folks. CDFIs exist all across the country. There are 1,600 of them. They specialize in different things. Some do affordable housing, some focus on small business, and so we're really engaged in supporting the Maine small business community in becoming more electrified and supported by renewable energy and battery storage, and also supporting folks who had a harder time breaking into entrepreneurship have the opportunity to do so.
Awesome, thank you.
Yes. Okay. I'm Josie. Yeah, so I am an earth lawyer. I trained my JD. I focus on agricultural law and tribal partnership and reforming the conservation sector, land trust situation, conservation easements. All the way through, I focused on local government engagement approaches because I was really interested in supporting the bioregional movement, and the cultivation of local sovereignties. That word has been coming up a lot, which is, the definition is the capacity to make and then implement, like enforce your own decisions locally.
Beautiful. Here. My name is Scott Blahn. I'm the executive director of an organization in Norway, Maine called the Center for an Ecology-Based Economy. I'm a very unlikely person to be in that role. I have an MFA in photography, and I'm a permaculture designer, and been composting my poop for the last 40 years, and now I'm having like meetings with the governor, and working with the political social infrastructure that's out there, and it's interesting. And I was here 11 years ago for the last annual Northeast Permaculture Convergence, and it is so nice to be back with this permaculture convergence spirit here at the Common Ground. Thanks, Sid, for making this happen.
Hi everyone, my name is Stephen Filler. I feel like I'm a lawyer from the old world. I've been practicing law for a long time, working mostly for small businesses, medium-sized businesses, nonprofits. Big focus on renewable energy for the last 20 years, but also worked with cooperatives and sustainable agriculture. And I kind of come here in my life with years of frustration for the personal desire for real systems change, and frustrations with the law as largely not the only barrier to it, but a big barrier to it. So like one example is probably most of you have heard of community solar. Maybe many of you think that means it's owned by the community. In 90% of the cases, it's not owned by the community, it's owned by private equity, except Scott CB is one of maybe a handful of examples around the country that are building community ownership models. And that's, I think that's the kind of thing that's really important. So that's what I'm hoping we can achieve.
Amazing. Thank you all for being here. Our central guiding question for this panel is how do we move from extractive economies that deplete life to regenerative ones that restore it? So with that in mind, our first question is about working within our existing systems. Curious to hear how you have found ways to work within existing financial, legal, or cultural systems to seed and grow the regenerative systems we want to see. If you can share a couple of insights with us.
Absolutely. It's an amazing question as well. In the first few years of running my businesses, everything happened so fast. And in that, I was really inspired by rehabilitating soil and land, and bringing people back into the awareness of like the feeling rather than the look of a landscape, and really the feeling that you receive from knowing that your soil is harvesting carbon out of the atmosphere, and that you're reestablishing native pollinator populations, and that you're doing a small part in the wider web that we're all woven into. And in that, I was inspired to join the Conservation Commission, and I was voted as the chair of the Conservation Commission. I was like 25 at the time. And in this leadership role in my community, with working alongside my clients and being inspired by the work that I've done, now each housing development or property or person who buys property where we live we're reestablishing policy in like our tiny little community to bring awareness to the native landscapes and choices and tiny choices that we can all make to bring this coherence back to what our landscapes are doing for the bigger picture. And I think that that's just been something that's been very in the front of my awareness as I work and also work and volunteer on this Conservation Commission. It's kind of just been a collaborative effort across advocating through my clients, and then seeing how inspired and intrigued and transformed people are by having the awareness of what it is that they are helping to do. And so I think that that's Is that a good answer to the question? Okay, good. Well, that's, I think that's complete.
What was the question again?
That's a big question.
How are you working? How have you found ways to work within existing financial, legal, or cultural systems to seed and grow the regenerative systems we want to see?
I think the CDFI world, one of the things that is really, I think, promising about it, to one of your original points about being a bridge, is that we have an opportunity to be really innovative and responsive in the ways that we finance people. And, we currently exist in a world where to start a business or sustain your business, it might be likely that you do need financing. And so I think we work really hard to be thoughtful about supporting people who have maybe been marginalized in wealth building related to entrepreneurship and doing so, and supporting them in getting in. So that would be things like re-envisioning what it means to have collateral on your loan and like what types of things we might accept as collateral, or are we switching? Do I do both now? What do I do?
Yeah.
Okay. Is that better? Perfect. Okay. Sorry, my brain's at like half capacity. I gotta. So yeah, like really re-envisioning what traditional financing might have required of businesses to be able to receive financing for the work they want to do, and then also in terms of what I spoke to before around making renewable energy and battery storage and energy efficiency more accessible to folks, being sure that we are able to incentivize that through lower interest rates and things like that. And I think ultimately recognizing as an institution that we exist and are lending within a system that is in dire need of change and reform, and engaging at the policy level to ensure that those changes are being made and that those who are struggling within it, that their voices are heard at the state and federal level.
Can you explain a little bit about the difference between a CDFI and like a normal bank?
So we're not a bank in that we don't have customers who have a bank account with us. Like, we don't accept deposits, essentially, is like the way that I would put it. So we are a lender where we have loan applicants who may or may not receive a loan from us, and so those would be the customers that we have. And then we also engage in as I mentioned, policy advocacy, and then also provide free business and financial advising services. So it's just a little bit of a wider breadth than a bank, and that's the most important part, really. We really exist as an alternative to traditional financing, and CDFIs are all over the country and do lots of different things. So I'm kind of just speaking to what we do and our specialization in the small business world. But yeah, the primary difference would be that we don't have banking customers that have like a checking and a savings account, but we do the lending side of things. And then lots of other kind of financial reform advocacy outside of that.
That's awesome.
Do you need both?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh,
you have that one. Okay. We'll share this one.
I also have one more clarifying question with the CDFIs, which is like, there is a mandate, right, to keep finance circulating within a geography, right? Or like within the community where you're rooted? Is that true?
We are a Maine-based CDFI, and we do our lending in Maine. If there are examples of projects that we've done outside of Maine, and that typically happens when something is like extremely mission aligned and we have a shared partner on that project. And so we do have national reach technically, but we're really focused on ensuring that financing stays within the Maine economy.
Cool. Thank you. Yeah, I feel it's super related to, I'm not quite sure how to fully frame my response.
Rights of nature.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm really interested as an earth lawyer in rights of nature implementation and in their function in building a truly relational sort of a kinship economy, which is what the rights of nature practice, the evolution of that as a legal approach, is attempting to manifest as well. It's developed in the Western legal tradition as a way to preemptively avoid human activities that degrade ecosystems, through our relationship to the ecosystems. And it was natural for me to find my way into the field because I was focusing on regenerative farming and food sovereignty in the Northeast, in a country where the incentives are really perverse. They're against ecological integrity on farms and against cultivating soil health and supporting the human practices, the ways, to being human in relationship to the land and the ecosystem that's generating the food, right? It's not compatible with a business model and with traditional financing models. And so then, of course, when you have, a finance system enclosed market regulatory system in DC that's creating something like the Farm Bill that starts to generate perverse incentives, right, for the wrong farming models, then it was really, really confusing as I was getting started in the field, trying to approach that exclusively through policy and through our existing legal architecture. I had to start engaging the questions of deeper reform, of how are we questioning and shifting the fundamental principles, of that our laws and that our policies are operating on top of. And so I would say that learning from soil first and foremost, soil is my first teacher, soil health principles is my first teacher, which have a lot to do with maintaining the integrity of relationship and place specificity, right? Like I landed on earth law, real alignment to legal practice that respects ecological relationship mandates us to restructure the executive branch of our government. We need to restructure forms of decision making where people in relationship to the soils on the farmland are the ones governing. So it became a big project of so we're going to, create the forums, incentives for everyone to show up, connect them to the ones governing, to people in the state, agricultural agencies, and soil and water conservation districts. So I was never the type of attorney that was only thinking, how do we move the new principles through the court system and make the argument to the legal system, but also how are we structuring the human movements and human relationships that get to act on the principles and are supported in acting on the principles. And it's a dual, right? Like our approach from a governance lens, but then also, our approach financially, because, we've enclosed the human energy and life ways, into financial ways of right, you need the money to be there for it to be viable, for people to participate and implement what you need to implement. And that's why I actually am now working a private practice called mycelial law, where as an attorney, I work in sort of diverse legal specializations to tend to the different pieces of that exercise. And I believe it relates to enabling the integrity of human relationship to the more than human world, to practice in that way. And I'm grateful to be in the Earth Law Society with other attorneys where we're going to talk about how to practice in that way together. And really, so if the rights of nature movement, assigning rights to rivers, assigning rights to our more than human kin, is the judicial branch approach that we need to reform and create a kinship-based legal and governance system, we also need to think about the executive branch. What are the agencies doing? How are we moving finance? Who's deciding on who moves finance towards people getting to act on those new laws that we've decided on together? Sweet.
Well, I'll follow up on that a little bit in terms of the executive branch and specifically the Environmental Protection Agency. CB had a grant So basically, we work in that intersection with the status quo that's out there in the political system and the finance system. We're mostly grant funded through state funding, federal funding, a lot of private funding, membership, and we do fee-for-service work as well. But we had an EPA grant, like we got maybe 2 or 3 years ago, that was to do a series of agroforestry workshops in our community to start working on the health of our forests, teach people how to, do agroforestry projects, look at species. We have a food forest at our community garden. We do workshops over there. And this was being funded by our federal government. We created a position at CB to manage this whole program. And then halfway through, it no longer, because of the executive branch decided that no longer met their mission, and they just took the money away. So, and that directly relating to what you're talking about, but there are other, we have, as Stephen mentioned, we're very, CB does a lot of work with the Cooperative Development Institute. So when we had a bicycle hauling, trash hauling cooperative for a while, based on pedal people that CDI helped us with, and now we have, it's called Maine Community Power Cooperative. It's a consumer-owned community solar cooperative. And if you have a CMP bill, if anybody here is paying a CMP bill, you got to become a member, because then you can kind of own your own power company. But and that was a grant from the Department of Energy, oddly enough. And I was on vacation last year, van camping out in Grand Canyon, and got an email from the DOE that they're ready to give us like $5 million. And they're still talking to us, even though all the people have been fired and other people are coming in and stuff. We're still actually in play with this grant. We've already drawn down over half of that grant to do this community solar project. So as much as we'd like to just, turn our backs, there was this fire hose of funding that we shape-shifted into being able to work in that realm. And this was a few years after the big climate strikes, when we had 200 people in the streets of Norway, Maine, and backed up the traffic in both directions. So we play a fine line, play it both ways, but definitely working within the existing financial, and, especially in that grant-funded world.
That's amazing. So I think a lot of these legal things at the federal and state level, politics moves back and forth. In the 70s, there was all this amazing environmental, I remember going to Lewiston, Maine as a kid, and the water was brown and smelled. And the last time I was there 2 years ago, it was clean and quite beautiful. I've been both of them? Okay. I've been, for the last 15 years or so, I've been working as general counsel for a company called Joule Community Power, Joule, like the energy unit. And we help build something called community choice aggregation in New York State. And this is, I think, a really good example of how people can really have an impact on policy. Community choice aggregation is a way for municipalities to buy electricity supply on behalf of their residents. It's on an opt-out basis, and the model we were using was it was going to be all renewable. So what happened was, in Westchester County, there were at the time, and still, there are all these, environmental action committees and climate action committees at communities that are very active and put a lot of pressure on the elected officials, the mayors and the boards and stuff. And for 3 years, they were pushing on to do different things. And one of the things was this CCA thing, community choice aggregation, and all these towns, they're small, from 5,000 people to 50,000, say, cities, and they pressured it, and there was and they passed resolutions. It went up to the state. We tried to get some state legislation passed. It got vetoed by the governor. It was Cuomo at the time, but Cuomo then called the Public Service Commission and said, "I want this to be not legislation, I want it to be a Public Service Commission ruling. So the Public Service Commission ruled this. It started. The program has been in place for 7 or 8 years. It's now a lot of challenges because the electricity market's been crazy. But I think it's a good example of the way that citizens at a grassroots level can really make a difference with important policy. And I'm like kind of wondering, how come there aren't, economic committees like this working on economic change? And I think it would be really interesting. I think those climate committees could be used to do this, because part of my learning in this has been like, to me, climate change is really critical, but it's not the cause of our, the root cause is the economic system, and unless we have economic transformation, so yeah, maybe we'll solve climate change, but we're just our nitrogen cycles are all messed up, and we're gonna run, we're biodiversity, we're killing everything off. So unless we have real economic change, a thing that I think is working on a small scale and is our cooperatives. And I think, to me, I think of the economic system like the inputs, the companies that own it, the workers, and then the consumers, and building alignment of that circle is really important. And co-ops can do that individually, and they can also do it collectively. Like Maine has the cooperative conference called P6, which the principle 6 is about cooperatives working together. And there are places like in Spain, in Madrigal, in northern Italy, where these models are really working. And I think that's the kind of places that, I look to for inspiration. And I think we could all be, it's hard. There's a lot of forces against it, but yeah.
Can you speak to the forces against it? It's hard to answer the question. If you could redesign one piece, if you could redesign one piece of the economic system, what would it be?
That's a really complicated question. But one theory I've been playing around with in my head is the whole idea of limited liability companies, and I don't mean LLCs, but corporations that have limited liability, and they were formed by, the East India Company. They were royal charters that created corporations, and every corporation or LLC today comes from the government, and the government says, okay, you can have this entity, and you can put in $1,000, and that's all you can ever lose. One of the problems is you could make, if you're like invested in, Standard Oil in 1910, and you could have put in $1,000, but then you got dividends for 100 years, and you made $100 million, and then someone says, "Oh, you should be responsible for, climate change," and they're like, "Well, I'm sorry, you have my $1,000, but the rest of it I'm keeping," and that's the way our system is kind of set up, and I think we should be looking at that. B Corps are an effort to fix that, but they're kind of they're not enough. I love the effort. I love the people working on B Corps, and they're really important. But like if you're actually creating a business that's non-extractive and it's creating social good, it seems like you should get a little bit more than just being able to call yourself a B Corp.
So you think that cooperatives are better than B Corp? That's the answer.
Cooperatives they're not necessarily better. Like I don't know if you've been following REI. Like REI is a consumer co-op, and the workers all want to strike because they're not taking care of their workers. But the thing about co-ops is that it gets people working together, sharing in the benefits, and you can create these cycles of positive feedback loops, way better than just. I think Josie's law practice is called mycelial law, and I think that thinking about the model like that of like of cooperation between business entities, as opposed to just everyone's in competition with each other, is a very positive way to think about the system.
Incentivizing collaboration over competition,
Yeah.
how the rising tide can lift all boats. I would love, Scott, to hear from you about your personal experience of raising funding to create the co-op that exists at CB and how to prevent it from being co-opted and how to maintain that cooperative nature.
Really good question. Our CB is in a building that is owned by our food co-op. So we kind of have co-op in our DNA. And there's something in Maine called the Cooperative Development Institute that we've all done training with. They have 2 tiers of training in terms of cooperative development. So we're kind of like, ideally every enterprise we're going to launch is going to be based on a cooperative, either worker or consumer cooperative. And I think it just keeps things transparent. It keeps things real. People, like with our, everything is open book, and there's no profit extracted. If there's any profit generated from a consumer co-op, the consumers, the members, the owners of the cooperative end up deciding how that wealth gets redistributed back in. And they get to pick their board. They get to vote in their board. The board gets to control the management. So, as members of a cooperative, you're an owner, and so we've been working on 3 different cooperatives. One launched 5 years ago or so, and just recently folded up. The bike cooperative. The people that launched it moved away from the community. I stepped back because I went full-time for CB. We were hauling trash all over Norway on bikes, probably hauled hundreds of tons of trash for 5 years. And it was people made good money doing it, and we just never could scale it. This other co-op is very different. It's managed. There are professionals managing this. We have a CEO who is from the industry. We pay him very good money to manage this because it's super complicated stuff. It's not hauling trash on bikes. So that ends up being like we have, and that's being formed into 2 cooperatives. We'll have a worker cooperative that's developing the projects and a consumer cooperative that is then benefiting from the projects and ultimately will own all the projects. So it just, I don't know, it's like your food co-op. It's just having that that it's democratic. It's just like it's a democratic form of business where everybody has a say and people can have their voices heard, and then in Maine we do have this network, this cooperative ecosystem that's developing. P6 that Stephen mentioned it's an amazing conference every year, and I think there's probably getting close to 100 co-ops in Maine now. I mean, there's some traditional older co-ops too, like we have fishing co-ops and there's ag co-ops in the Midwest, and it's not like necessarily a progressive, liberal kind of idea. There's all kinds of other co-ops as well. But
what are some challenges that you're facing? And I would love for Josie to speak next on like the legal structures that can really hold the process of creating cooperatives. See my thinking.
Yeah, you want to take that on? I mean, CDI does a really amazing job. They've given us endless amounts of technical support. They have a lawyer, they have an accountant, and they'll meet with us, and they never charge us a dime. One of their members, the person who's our liaison there, attends most of our meetings, our board meetings, and they're putting a ton of effort into making sure this co-op can work. And otherwise, it's very complicated, and the legal part of it, we would never have made it through, like the bylaws and all that stuff, if we didn't have pro bono legal help. But I'll probably speak more to that.
Sure. Cool. Yeah, this is a great system.
Amazing.
Okay. So, and we're speaking to one element in the collective system that we wish could change, or that needs to change in order to...
Yes. So, yeah, if you can change one thing about the economic system, what would it be? And we started to talk about cooperatives. If you want to talk about something else. like islands of coherence, and then
Right.
how that can also establish cooperatives by enabling mutual aid networks through shared values. And
Right, where you're totally getting into what's happening here, right? Like in how everyone's coming together in Permatours and a common sense of, or a shared curiosity, right? About pressures and challenges that are mutual to a lot of the projects here. Yeah, I feel really supported often by Susanna mentioned the islands of coherence theory, which speaks a lot to the dichotomy of value systems and story that we perceive ourselves to be living. The cooperative model entails the involvement of humans who believe they're living a story that involves sharing and cultivating shared abundance, mutual thriving. That is a fundamentally different story than the post-enclosure movement, European inherited, Roman Empire seeded war model. We're competing with each other to extract as much as possible because we're not safe from each other and human nature is not cooperative. The wind is just being really responsive, I feel like, to everybody here. That's why the wind is being so crazy. Yeah, and the cooperative, we're dealing with a field of like governance is the practice of a bunch of humans reaching agreements with each other and then carrying out those agreements. So governance happens in the private sector and the public sector. In the public sector, we have the social contract that legitimizes who gets to govern, right? And it's the agreement with the people of like, this is how we're giving you the power to govern and this and this, this. In the private sector, yeah, what Scott's talking about with structuring bylaws and sense making together, you know, having to project like how are all our relations going to go? That's what makes the start of forming a cooperative complex, no? Having to sort through all these things, these elements. And yeah, we're in a time where it's really important to try and myceliate across silos as much as possible and really be trying to hit common principles of like, can we speak to ways that in the private sector we're structuring our activities and our conduct according to the story that we really want to be in these times. Like, it's really important. Our systems are shaking and getting destabilized, and we need to cooperate, work together to be in right relation to the land and generate resilience and abundance with each other. The question is one of survival at this point. And to be speaking to the government, right? Like, yeah, the same principles should be in play, need to be in play in our local government forums, our state government forums. Otherwise, we have every right to renege this social contract. If all of a sudden we're in a different story than you, government, we need to renegotiate the contract, you know, and I like to just keep repeating, there is really nothing in any of the legal components of the U.S. governance system and all the documents and institutions that hold it that code us or are against us and say that we can't be in the process of renegotiating that social contract. So that's all to say, at the local level, if communities are saying we don't want other business models to be in operation in our region, in our community, that entail a small group of stakeholders or shareholders in a corporation way over there getting to take our resources here, or our right, like human labor here, and extract it and move it over there. That's a corporate model. We like want to be conducting business and structure an economy according to the cooperative form. That's a conversation we can have with local government as well. That, right, those can be tenets of conversation that happen in bioregional congresses and in processes of creating amendments to local constitutions or creating local ordinances. We can put all of those codes, right, in
into our government structure at the same time and have the public and private sectors starting to really speak with one voice in our towns, in our states. At least, that's what I believe our generation could do. It'll take a lot of energy and time. But yeah, that's one take on it.
Woo! Yeah. I think what your question, Sue, made me think about is re-envisioning what it means to be a small business owner in the economy, and what it means for that to be a part of community care rather than imagining it as separate from that, as kind of is typical right now. And I think the work that we do around supporting small businesses and transitioning to renewables is a big part of that. People transition to renewables for a variety of reasons. Sometimes it's the most cost effective, sometimes it aligns with their personal philosophy and they're interested in moving away from fossil fuels, but ultimately that then becomes a pillar of resilience in their community that has a stable energy source, a low cost energy source for the people around them to potentially use. And so I think really thinking about what it means as a business owner to engage in practices that allow you to support the community around you beyond just being a purveyor of goods and services.
What was coming up for me when you shared that question was more around, or rather less around economic changes that we can make and more around like local government policy changes that we can make in regards to, I'm obviously like obviously we're all nature person people here, but I work with the land, on the land every day, and so what I'm really face to face with is invasive species that are really degrading our native populations of pollinators and things of that sort. And so what I'm working with the other members of my conservation commission on is changing like the policy in the state that I live on, so we cannot sell invasive plants in nurseries and have them infiltrate these sacred places that are already completely overrun and bursting at the seams with invasive plants where the native populations don't really have a chance. And so not only changing the policy there to negate invasive species from coming into our landscapes more and more, but we can all have a say in what goes into our landscape. But nonetheless, around that same wheelhouse in regards to, I just had something else, but it's gone now. I was just thinking, it's like, but nonetheless, just around changing how we allocate our resources in regards to our attention on the specific plants that we're integrating into the landscape, I think is what that really brought up for me, and the particular work that we're doing. And it doesn't take much more than advocating, sometimes relentlessly, to the people who can make these changes. But if you have enough inertia from your community and from like-minded people who you are working with, it's inevitable in my mind. So.
And while you have the mic, and we'll pass it back the other way as the last question, if you could imagine a thriving economy in 50 years, what would that look like?
Another big question. All these are such loaded, heavy, beautiful questions. A thriving economy in 50 years is, for lack of a better way to put it, all of our needs being met in a way that's nutritive to the path that we're all a part of. But I think if you had to break it down and like the ways that, like, if you are moving into entrepreneurship, if you're feeling into that, like, genuinely, like, I teach regenerative business on the internet as well to women who are starting their own entrepreneurship journeys or trying to scale their entrepreneurship journeys. And what it really comes down to is like empowerment in the value that you have in the specific area that you are trying to nourish, and that paying the people who are working for you a livable wage and standing really strong with a straight spine and an open heart when you're in front of clients and when you're speaking about what it is that you love to do and why you're doing it. It is magnetic, and I want to see all of us who have vibrant minds and hearts who care so much about the things that we're doing paid well and pay our people well to continue doing this work that's essential and integral to the survival and the thrival of our species. So 50 years from now, I hope all of our needs are met in community with integrity. That's my prayer.
You know, I really hope that we are experiencing a society in 50 years where everyone really has the autonomy and agency to engage in society in the way they feel compelled to, and are not held back by so many of the boundaries and inequities we currently live within and aside, and that we're really moving beyond the space that we're in right now. I think we have all for our whole lives existed in this capitalist system that really, like, capitalism is king, and my hope is also that we move in a direction where there's really a mosaic of options. I think trying to get everyone on exactly the same page to do exactly the same thing and live in exactly the way that each of us might individually want to is challenging and impossible. And so having the cultural and societal resilience for us to be able to thrive alongside each other in the different ways that we each feel most aligned to and want to, and that everyone feels supported in the ways kind of that you were speaking to, in having the resources in whatever way that looks like for them to be able to do so.
Amen. Yeah, I hope also, right, that we, that there's more foundation laid under, the capacity to live in, to experience the stories that there is enough, that there's abundance, that alignment to ecosystems and human relationship weaving provides enough for all. And that we become really good at simplifying, working with just picking out the legal tools. There aren't many, or like the legal structures that can create a boundary around the humans that want to live that way and practice that way and keep them held, right? Like the containment principle of the divine masculine, so that new story can move within those containers. And that, like, an element we haven't surfaced yet is the perpetual purpose trust, but moving more value into perpetual purpose trusts that can provide stable foundations for communities to get the streams of abundance that they need. Deeper resourcing for and incentives for gathering and sense making and collaborating in ways that it takes to see the concept of creating cooperatives that can govern, the assets and the abundance that are held in containers that are encoded with the news story, so that, again, like, that there's protection from the structures and ways of being in the economy that we've created that legally empower extraction and disempowerment of local communities on the ground. I hope for, the opposite containers to be coming up from the grassroots level and holding people and protecting people just more and more and more, so that the news story is lived and proven and embodied, and it can't be counteracted anymore.
Nicely put. Building on that, after Josie straightens out all those systems and the legal aspect of this, that we seize the moment, and if anybody can basically get anywhere they want to go on the planet, on their feet, on a bike, and some public transportation that's running off of solar power. Everybody can see food out their window, and they live in a food forest. There's food growing everywhere, there's abundance everywhere. Everybody knows how to tend to that. Everybody is housed in shelter that's made from materials that can be compostable houses that everybody has access to, that are beautiful and nurture everybody. And the energy that we use in our society to drive our economy is just embedded into everywhere. Everywhere you look, we're energy and storing energy. So it's our system, and it's free. The sun shines for free, so energy is abundant and free and accessible to everyone, and life is good. And all businesses are cooperatives.
So I love what everyone has said here. There's this new organization that Josie mentioned. We're working on this group. It's called the Society for Earth Law, and it's mainly comprised of a lot of older lawyers who are like retired or semi-retired, and it's three of the big principles of this organization are relationality, reciprocity, and responsibility. And the idea is that this is going to like seed law schools and lawyers, and in 50 years, there's going to be this, hopefully sooner, these principles are going to, go out into the world. I was on a call with a group of maybe 4 or 5 lawyers who were like older than me. They were corporate. They looked like corporate lawyers. They looked like people that were like partners at law firms. They didn't seem to be people who would be having this conversation. The thing that came up, we went around. Someone said, "How are you doing?" And we went around, and every person talked about love. They were like, "This person," and I was like, it was amazing, and. So there's that. And then this group, I got turned on to this wonderful book called Sharing Life by a guy named Andreas Weber. Some of you may know. You can download it for free. You can also get a copy for free, which I highly recommend because it's beautiful. And the book is really about, it's about animism. And the Society for Earth Law turned me on to this book. And it's all about animism and finding life in everything, and finding the sacredness of all living things and everything on the planet. And I think there's it's more about a way of being than an achievement. And I think it's really important, and I'd say being in this community for this weekend, it's like very much manifested here, and I think the spirit of this community is really, really important, and it needs to be nurtured, and it needs to persist through whatever the economy is going through now, whatever politics we have, as bad as things may get, hopefully they won't, but that spirit of life and community is like really important, and I hope, I have a new grandson, and it's hard having young people in the world today. I think it's like, what do you say to them? How do you be? It's like, my dad used to say, "It's your problem now," but and now I'm like, okay, well, it's still my problem a little bit, but anyway, so I just think I really appreciate all the work everyone here is doing and the community that you're creating. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Nicely put.
Then we'll open it up to questions if anyone has anything they want to ask.
I just also wanted to say one more thing based off of your point there around the animism between, I'm big into plant spirit wisdom, I'm also a flower essence therapist, and I just wanted to say a note there, as we navigate the next 50 years, and all of the paperwork and all of the logic and all of the planning and all of the collaborating that goes into birthing this world that we're all walking forwards toward. Please ask for help from the land. Like, literally, like, I scaled my business using the elements. Like, that is the only, everyone's like, how did you do what you did? And I'm like, the plants, they told me how to do everything, and they do have the answers. And so just redirecting our attention, because we get caught in this mindscape of this washing machine of having to be attentive to the many different changes that we're making in regards to like forms and meetings and calls and emails and all of these things that help to knit together this tapestry that we're weaving, but bringing the attention back to that intention of, okay, like, who can help me or how can I help myself? And the best way to do that is to bring ourselves back to these present moments, being in community together, and like genuinely like ask a tree about it and like actually do what they tell you to do. And I'm sure we're all aware of the power, but it's just to reassure you that is indeed how I am doing everything. That is how I am doing everything. So I highly recommend. I just wanted to also share that.
Being guided by natural law.
Yeah, it's like literally our consciousness has evolved from the consciousness of nature, and so they've seen it all. And even though the flavors of difficulty that we're up against now are particularly nuanced, they still have the code. Like, nature still has the code to unlock the ease and the nourishment and the collaboration that it's going to take, and redirecting our attention back to our feet on the earth, constantly secure, constantly supported, every step of our lives until now and every step of our lives going forward. Like, they've got our backs and they want this to happen too. It's just
We are nature.
yeah.
Yes.
Question.
May we remember that we are her, and as we learn to listen to her and be more embodied expressions of her, that this process of reciprocity can enable humans and the planet to flourish.
Yeah.